We are talking about Nebraska's breakout performers of the spring who are not named Dylan Raiola. That's next.
You are Locked On Nebraska, your daily Nebraska Cornhuskers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello on a Wednesday, and thanks for making Locked On Nebraska your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I admit it, I have a competitive side, and it's a big fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on the classic board game Monopoly. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go today, free on the App Store and Google Play.
Okay, Mitch. Here we go on a Wednesday. It's May. It's the college football off season, for sure now. As we'll this month. This is the month in the next 3 or 4 weeks where we'll start seeing game times and
can't wait.
and watch lists and things of that nature. Yeah. We got a busy month ahead.
We're gonna do a whole episode. I just decided in the last 5 seconds on Nebraska's Friday night game, wherever that may be, and what challenges that could bring. I don't know. It's either going to be USC, Purdue, or Indiana, and already a Friday night game on the schedule at Iowa, or Friday afternoon, whatever it is. But one of those three. I'm kind of hoping for USC, to be honest, but. We'll get to that in a future episode when those things are coming out soon, I believe.
Right around the corner, baby. Yes. So welcome to the show. We'll continue our kind of look back through the spring, and so let's go here to start with today, Mitch. I mean, we mentioned hey, you have to remember when Matt Rule brings up these players. We saw Jalen Lloyd and Matt Rule said that Lloyd would probably go down as Nebraska's most improved player of the spring. Let's go to a different category, the breakout performer. And then, of course, the caveat that Dylan Raiola is not eligible for this award. We have to, kind of keep him separate from everybody else. Who's the first name that you think of when you think of a breakout guy from the last 3 or 4 weeks in Nebraska football?
Yeah, Dylan's not eligible because he would win. So
right, correct. You would win every award.
I'm gonna go with the guy that I think we'll see Dylan throw the ball quite a bit to, and I believe they are living together, which is always
you mentioned
important.
That, yeah.
Yes, Jakori Barney, the wide receiver out of Miami, who had 3 catches for 66 yards in the spring game last Saturday. He caught a 41-yard pass from Heinrich Harburg. I was impressed with the way that Barney adjusted to the ball in the air on that touchdown catch, and then was able to have kind of a good sense about where he was when he came down and just jumped over the pylon and got into the end zone. That one may have been reviewed in a Saturday in the fall kind of setting, and might have been a 40-yard catch to the 1 instead of a touchdown. But hey, in a spring game, it's a touchdown. And I was also really impressed. And this is why I put him in this position as my breakout performer of the spring. I was really impressed with the way that Barney went over the middle. It was a 3rd and 13 play with Raiola in charge of the offense, and Dylan threw it across the middle, trusted that the fellow freshman would be there right under his chin. Rule talked about how as a quarterback, you can't be the receiver and the quarterback. You've got to be the quarterback. And I think that's just his way of saying you can't try to do too much. And Barney was there like he was supposed to be. And that's going across the middle where you don't know what awaits, or you kind of do know what awaits when you catch the ball. And it's not going to feel really good. As a guy who's under 200 pounds, he came down, he took a hit, and he put Nebraska right at the first down marker. I think they needed a dive across the line on 4th to get it, but that's a big time play, and we didn't see Nebraska do that last year, and honestly, we haven't seen Nebraska do that much in any recent year.
There was the kick return, which I mean, I know we're talking about. The speed is in question, of course, of how fast everybody around him is moving. But kind of one cut that he made and then kind of got upfield untouched all the way until, of course, he ran into, the guy who was on the other team in that case, and Tristan Alvano, and Mitch, the bane of Mitch's existence, the gray jerseys came back to strike again against Jakori Barney.
Yeah, Nebraska has not seen the kind of just natural ability at the kickoff return position that some guys have, and it's just an instinctive thing. Nebraska history is filled with players who have that kind of skill, and but we haven't seen somebody in several years. I mean, I don't know that it has to go all the way back to DeMornay Pearsonell, but he's the guy that, most recently who I remember who was just so talented at that. It's not it's about speed, it's about quickness, but it's really just about having a feel for where you're at. And it's difficult. You can have great running backs and great receivers and great DBs who aren't good kick returners and punt returners because they don't have that feel. And it looks like Barney's got that. They just more easily get into the open field. And I want to play a clip here of Barney after the spring game. He was asked about that kickoff return, and at the start of the question here, it's his answer of getting tackled by the kicker Tristan Alvano in the aforementioned gray jersey. So here it is.
That kickoff return was crazy, bro. Like the kicker, like I thought he was my teammate, so I was gonna get ready to celebrate with him, and I seen him tackle me. I'm like, but I know it's gonna be in the meet. It's gonna be crazy, but they're gonna forget about all that week 2 when I'm taking it back on Colorado. So
I love that so much. Maybe my favorite quote of the entire spring so far, and I was kind of sad because I was watching that whole press conference and kind of just moved on afterwards. Like I would have got in there and been like, ooh, what's that? What did you say? You're going to bring a kickback against Colorado in week 2?
There was no reaction. I think.
It's just like, okay, we're moving on to the next question.
That was done in the hallway outside. So there's a big media room where everybody sits at tables, and where every time you hear from Matt Rule, he's standing at the podium with these bright lights shining on him. And they didn't put Barney, the freshman, in that situation. He was out in the hallway at the Hawks Center. So there were probably only 3 or 4 media folks standing around him when he made that comment. But yeah, I would have liked to have heard the follow-up to that question about what else do you plan to do against Colorado in week 2?
He didn't, you notice he didn't say week 1 against UTEP. He said week 2 against Colorado, which
Nebraska's already overlooking UTEP.
Yeah, put it on the bulletin board for UTEP this summer. But no, it's a great pick, and I was super high on him as a recruit, and I think he's one of the gems of the class, and so I think he'll be a player for them this year, whether it's in the kick return game or in any sort of return game, but at the wide receiver spot too, which is an increasingly kind of full room depth filled position. I think it's one of the takeaways from the spring, but I think he's got a chance to make a difference for Nebraska on that side, the offensive side and the special team side.
Yeah, Miami just became kind of a hotbed for Nebraska late in the recruiting process, and some of the players that Nebraska got out of Miami, like somebody that we'll talk about in the next segment, it was more or less just kind of an oversight by the Hurricanes, or maybe a mistake that the Miami Hurricanes made in not locking down their own backyard. And then, with Barney, Nebraska did a good job recruiting him, and I believe it was 5 that Nebraska signed out of South Florida in this class. Not necessarily like what you would think this staff was going to be known for. I mean, you look to Texas, of course, and in Pennsylvania, where Matt Rule and his staff were active more in his first recruiting class in that 23 group. But Miami was a big part of what Nebraska targeted in the class of 2024. And I noticed on social media this week that Terrence Knighton, Nebraska's defensive line coach, was right back down there in Miami. Huskers got on the road on Sunday. As soon as the spring was over, they were out on the road, and had 6 coaches at Lincoln Southwest to see Jackson Carpenter, the wide receiver commit, and Pot Roast was down in South Florida, looking for more talent like Jakori Barney.
Grind don't stop, Mitch. Grind does not stop.
It really doesn't for those guys.
All right, coming up, I will tell you my breakout performer of the spring. We'll touch on the transfer portal as it closed up yesterday. We'll do that and more as we continue on the Locked On Nebraska podcast. All right, playoff time in the NBA and in the NHL. Baseball, of course, is into its second month now. FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. I'm not eligible for the $150 of bonus bets guaranteed. I'm an existing customer, so it's time for you to get in on this sweet deal. That's $150, win or lose. Bet on everything from if you're watching the NHL games anyway, if you're watching the NBA games anyway, you want to bet on a player to hit a home run, you could do that on the FanDuel Sportsbook on an app that's safe, secure, and easy to use. So what are you waiting for? Head to FanDuel.com/locked-on and make your first bet an automatic win. That is with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook.
All right, we're back for the second segment at Locked On Nebraska. A reminder, this is important as we talk on this Wednesday. The transfer portal is now closed. If players had not entered the transfer portal as of 11:59 on Tuesday night and they still have work to do to earn their undergraduate degree, then they don't get to go into the transfer portal, with the exception of some strange circumstances like a coaching change here in the summer. But not expecting anything like that at Nebraska. Chief Borders, as we talked about Tuesday on the show, is in the portal, the linebacker who previously played at Florida. Unofficially, you have walk-ons Jack Walkie, the quarterback who was previously at Ole Miss, and then Corver Dema, the linebacker out of Gretna, another walk-on. They entered on Tuesday, according to a report by Inside Nebraska. You can expect their names in the actual portal soon. But maybe, just maybe, that will be it from the Huskers. We will know very soon at some point on this Wednesday when, like, I don't know if the white smoke comes up from Memorial Stadium, like all is clear, that this is the roster as it's going to be. Possibly Nebraska will add some players from the portal, and that can continue for several more weeks down the road. But as far as going in, we're getting to the very, very end of that time.
Mitch, I don't mean to put you on the spot here, but since January, since we turned over the new year, how many scholarship players has Nebraska lost? Is it 3? Like, is that the number? Which is, just really, really low, obviously, and none of them impact players so far.
It's the lowest number in the Big Ten. I'm doing a piece on The Athletic that I'll publish on Thursday, where I look at the basically the projected 115 for Nebraska when camp opens in August. And I did this in January, and we'll get back into it here at the start of May. And it was timed for the moment that the portal was officially closed. And I'll kind of dissect that, like who's gone in, what kind of changes have been made to the roster. Generally going to do this 3 times a year in print. So once in January, once in May, and then again when they have the actual 115 when camp opens in August. So we'll see how closely I can project that today. But yeah, I'll have that number for you tomorrow on the show, and we can talk some more about the my projections and where they're at. But yeah, we want to get now to Connor's breakout performer of the spring. We heard mine, Jakori Barney. Where are you going? Back to South Florida, it seems.
I'm going back to South Florida, but I'd like to say this first. So Mitch, you made the parameters for this game, and I wasn't able to pick Dylan Raiola, and then you took Jakori Barney just right out from underneath my feet, and then then it kind of got a little, I don't know, it got a little difficult after that. Kind of looked around. Keep in mind, Nebraska is I don't know if it's an older team. It's a more experienced team with guys coming back. So I think it's a little difficult to kind of really make a name for yourself in a big way, but there was a few who did. So yeah, let's go with Vincent Shavers in this category. Since you chopped my knees off so much. No, Shavers had a really good spring, and it seems like I was more thinking about it in terms of just like the linebacker spot and the depth of the position there and all the different body types I think they want to have at the spot. It just feels like he's a guy who could get in there right away, because I think they want a lot of different things, and those guys move around. They have different skill sets. And they weren't overly deep there to begin with in the first place. I mean, you have guys like John Bullock, you added a transfer in Stephon Thompson. You got, kind of Jamari Butler, who hybrids, defensive line, linebacker type of thing. I saw some, Mekhi Bayer last year. So there's some guys that are in there. I don't know how far you go down the list before you get to a freshman who just came in and made a splash in his first spring in Vincent Shavers.
Yeah, first, I'm glad you went defense, because we've talked so much offense this week and even leading up to the spring game. So it's good to talk about Tony White's group, because I think they're still going to be the strength of the Nebraska team in 2024. I agree. Shavers was a breakout performer this spring, and he's not a name that we expected to hear a lot heading into the spring. So that's kind of what defines breakout performer in my mind. I mean, there were 23 early enrolling freshmen and transfers on this roster who went through spring ball. And if you had to rank them in order at the beginning of the spring, like a month and a half ago, Shavers might have been somewhere in the middle with what the expectation was for him. He was a part of the Miami recruiting class. Man, I'm speaking a little bit out of turn here. I have to go back and look at his recruiting journey, but definitely somebody that Miami led up on late in the process, and Nebraska was just kind of standing there and going, yeah, we like this guy. We would love to have him as a part of our class. And he came in right at the very end. And I think when the dust settles here on this stuff, that there's going to be a lot of teams in that part of the country where he's from who wish that they would have paid more attention to this guy in high school. The thing that you hear the most about Shavers, yeah, he's a good player, he's physical, he's around the ball, but it's just his attitude in practice and what he brings. Like, immediately somebody who's doing things that you'd like to see from a team leader as an early enrolling freshman.
Yeah. So yeah, he committed to Miami right about a year ago, little less than a year ago, and then was in that class for 6 or 7 months, and then pretty much, on the back end of that decommitment, he took his visit to Nebraska, and turned out pretty quick. So he made his official visit on December 15th, and then basically was on campus about a week later. He committed, and then came in as an early enrollee. So it moves pretty quick in that game, and you never know what you're going to get out of a guy like that. But it seems like it's the combination for me of a player who the staff seems to be pretty high on, and then you combine that with opportunity. And I think there's both of those things that are pretty evident for Shavers as he goes into his first season.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to watch. This isn't kind of an experiment that Nebraska's got going on here with these players from Florida. In recent years, it's just been really hit or miss, and mainly miss with the players that Nebraska's recruited out of Florida. And there was a big haul of those guys in the COVID year, and they got to campus and things were shut down. And that made it almost impossible.
Some of them didn't get to campus.
Right. That made it almost impossible. The early enrollees did. Some of the others didn't. Yeah. Very difficult for someone from Miami to come to Nebraska and, hey, you can't go anywhere. You can't do anything. And really no one from that group thrived and made it through. So you see Willis McGahee IV in this class, Amari Sanders. We've mentioned the two, Barney and Shavers. So we'll see what happens. It's a optimistic, very positive start. Also, Larry Tarver is a defensive back who will be joining Nebraska as a scholarship guy when the players report for the start of summer. So interested to watch that. But the Florida guys are off to a very good start, as we've documented today with Shavers and Barney.
All right, Mitch, we'll come back and we'll touch a little bit on Nebraska baseball, who lost again to Creighton last night, and a couple other things before we get out of here. But first, a quick message that if you're watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day and you have to turn down the volume with all of the yelling, make sure to switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. That's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'll be back after this.
Quick pause here to talk more about Monopoly Go. And I know what you listeners are saying. You guys have already talked about that, but there is just so much good stuff in this game. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with your friends to play in timed tournaments where you work together to build each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. You can get stickers to trade, cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with, hilarious emojis for taunting your friends when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. Monopoly Go features constantly changing tournaments and challenges. Try the mini games like digging for treasures and other activities. And there are always new events that help you win big. There's something fun to discover in Monopoly Go every time you sign on. So get off the bench and download it today, free on Google Play and the App Store.
All right, last night, Nebraska and Creighton locked heads for the third time in a month, and Creighton won again in Omaha, 9-5 last night. Nebraska got off to a good start, getting a double in the first inning, an RBI double in the first inning, and then gave up 6 in the bottom of the first due to some defensive miscues. Obviously, some timely hitting from Creighton, but it was an inning that was kind of spearheaded by a couple defensive mistakes, a ball that was lost in the sun, and then a misplayed pop-up on the infield that allowed Creighton to kind of continue it in the first 6-1, and they won it 9-5. And Creighton has now swept this series twice in the last 6 seasons, and they've won 10 out of 12 in the series now. So I don't know, Mitch, like, what do you make of the struggles? Obviously, I don't think it's it's not it's not too indicative of their postseason opportunities that Nebraska is going to have. But with that being said, it's a game that you want to win in the midweek, and it's against a rival.
Yeah, I think it's going to at some point affect Nebraska's postseason. And I know there are no more games between Creighton and Nebraska this season unless they play in the postseason. But I don't think as a Big Ten team, and I know what the RPI says, and Nebraska's strength of schedule is still fairly high, but they're not putting themselves in position to be a team that gets the benefit of the doubt on Memorial Day. And hey, it's May 1st, so we're into May. This is when you need to be playing well as a team. This is when you need to be doing the things where that selection committee can look at it and go, yeah, that's a team out of a conference that we don't necessarily love, that we want to put into a regional in either a favorable spot or just to get into a regional period. And if you turn on that game last night and you see Nebraska give up 6 runs in the bottom of the first inning when it has plenty of motivation to go out and play well, because Creighton has had its number in a couple of close games already this season. It's not inspiring the kind of confidence in me that would make me feel okay if I'm Nebraska and thinking about my postseason. So
it's a good thing to mention because, you look at the RPI and you're like, all right, you're comfortable. It's 24 right now. You look at all the projections that come out each week from all the baseball publications, and they're like, yeah, Nebraska's a high 2. They're still playing for, regional host capabilities. I don't see that either with this team. So I'm kind of with you. And yeah, I mean, what they did in the early portion of the season is kind of stacking them up right now. And losing 3 times to Creighton is not like the most abhorrent thing to do. Their RPI is smack dab at 50 right now. But
it's not terrible.
No, I'll say this, like, Creighton is a good team. They just can't figure it out on the weekends because they've had some injuries with there's no shame off its face in losing to Creighton. But what you said about the motivation factor, Creighton really, it wouldn't have mattered if they beat Nebraska last night in which they did, because their postseason hopes are completely dependent on if they can win some of their last 9 games, probably 7 out of their last 9 games in the Big East, where Nebraska is just trying to avoid a sweep. You feel like you're going out there for pride and you get stung in the first inning. That's the tough one, I think, to swallow. Not necessarily what it means for postseason implications, but what it means just kind of from a mental perspective and playing that team, and now having a really pretty extensive history of not having success against Creighton on those Tuesday nights.
Nebraska's ebb and flow this season, it just seems to continue in the same way, where they play well at the start of weekends in the Big Ten. And they've had some struggles on Sunday, and it was understandable this last Sunday against Iowa because Brody Brecht was on the mound for the Hawkeyes, and he throws 102 miles an hour, or at least he did in the first batter of the game. So Nebraska didn't get its offense going on Sunday, and then they go into these Tuesday games, and they can't get it going. Last night they come out and go up 6 runs in the was that Ty Horn, the freshman on the mound for Nebraska last night?
He got Nebraska 2 outs last night.
Yeah, and he's a guy that you looked at the beginning of the year and you thought, okay, this guy's got weekend potential, and I'm sure he still does at some point in his career, but this is not where you want to be at the start of May. So Nebraska has Kansas State at Haymarket Park tonight on Wednesday night, and then a midweek game next week against South Dakota State at home, and they're must wins. Nebraska's, I think, in a spot where even if it's just for the Huskers' own mindset, they've got to do something outside of the Big Ten to put themselves, if they do get in the postseason and they want to have any chance to win. I mean, you need to be able to have the confidence that you can beat someone out of the Big Ten, and it's been a while now for Nebraska since it's won games, not in league play. So, you want to ring the alarm bells, fine. You don't want to ring the alarm bells, fine. But I'm just taking like the metrics and the RPI out of it, and I have concerns about where I see this season going for Will Bolt's team.
Yeah, feel is a really important part of this. Let's mention before we go here, another addition for Fred Hoiberg yesterday in a big man from Washington. Braxton Mia is the guy. Stats don't blow you off the page, but I do like the pickup for them. It's a kind of a defensive rim protector, offensive rim runner. He'll catch some alley-oops, and provide a lot of depth for Nebraska and give them another look, another option down low. I really like the pickup, and the roster looks to be more and more complete, I think, by the week here.
Speaking of Creighton, if you don't want Ryan Kalkbrenner to hang 30 on you next year, assuming that he returns, he's entered his name in the NBA draft, but kind of thinking that Kalk is going to be back for the Jays. Good to have Braxton Mia if you're Nebraska when you go up to Omaha for that game, which is in November this in 2024, like the Friday night before the Wisconsin game. Yeah. So Mia, I think is important from the, like you said, rim protector, important from the standpoint to just give Nebraska a presence down low. And you're going to need that, obviously, in the Big Ten with some of the big guys you see. Probably not done. Fred Hoiberg's team is not done. I think they're continuing to try to look to add some size, maybe even another ball handler. So starting to get closer to being complete, and that's a big piece. Braxton Mia, the transfer out of Big Ten rival Washington.
That's right. Yeah, you can see the shape of it a little bit, which is important. Okay, the rest of the week we're gonna have a guest. We're gonna have a guest on Friday. We'll just continue to tease that and let you guess on who it might be on Friday, but we should have some fun. But stay tuned here to the Locked On Nebraska podcast. And a reminder, Mitch, I'll go with this one. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and it's now available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today available now on the free Fire TV channels app.